We're recording the introduction to this video straight onto Zoom because I've got about 2 minutes before my special guest comes on to discuss judgment with me. And I figured why not actually just keep it even more organic and worry less about, oh my gosh, when am I going to have the time to film this intro and the outro and just do it in one go, hopefully. Probably be more organic that way, right? So that's a judgment I made in order to preserve my time later on. And today's topic is going to be about judgment as a character strength. Now, when I hear that term, you know what? Firstly, I found it a little bit hard to think about who can I bring on for it. And secondly, a good friend of mine, Marguerite, actually said that maybe it's the word itself is clouded with a lot of judgment. Well, maybe I should use a better word, clouded with a lot of negative connotation. And perhaps I should reframe it to critical thinking, which really got me thinking that actually, yeah, maybe even I have some kind of negative bias towards the word judgment. We often use judgment as a tool for other people or against other people when we're talking in terms of a negative connotation, rather than thinking about judgments as a character strength to help us make good decisions. Now, according to the VIA, it involves making rational and logical choices, analytically evaluating ideas, opinions, and facts. So, to use a term that originally came from outside the character field, it is critical thinking. So, even the VIA character strengths website says that it is essentially critical thinking, weighing the evidence fairly, thinking it through, examining the evidence from all the sides before you come to a conclusion. Now, you need to be open-minded, being flexible in the way that you do things as well. And we have our first guest, which I'm going to pause the recording on and quickly just have a little catch up before we go straight into this. Let's go. And we're back live because I made a judgment call that I was going to film that intro, pardon the pun, that I'll be able to film that intro, complete it in 2 minutes time. But as you all know, I like to waffle. But I'm here with Belinda Batt, who we know each other through the Masters in Applied Positive Psychology program that I've often rambled on about and that I've had a few other guests on for as well. And I thought of Belinda particularly for the episode on judgment because of her work with mothers in particular, and how she kind of practices the use of judgment in both her personal and professional life. So we'll get straight into it, and I'll, probably cover some of the VIA bits on judgment as we go through it. So welcome, Belinda. Thank you for giving us your time. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do, and what brings you to work with character strengths?
Well, thank you for having me, Afsar. I'm very excited about this. It's nice to. I feel very honoured to be here. And yeah, we know each other through the psychology degree that we did, and I've always been very interested, in character strengths for that reason alone. That it gives you a lot of insights. And I think that I was really pleased that you asked me. Well, actually, if I'm completely honest, when you first approached me about judgment, I panicked a bit because I thought. I'm not sure where that comes on my list of strengths. And like, I didn't actually initially make the link to what I do, which is obviously coaching mums. And my research topic for my dissertation was maternal guilt and shame. And I didn't make that immediate connection about judgment and guilt. And shame, which was interesting because when you said, will you do judgment? I just thought, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to say about judgment. And then last night I redid my character strengths test, which is the free online test that you can do. And it came up as number 17 judgment.
Interesting.
Interesting on my list out of 24. So
24,
it
yeah.
wasn't very high up, which I guess is good because it means that I'm maybe not a very judgmental person. So that is a good thing. But yeah, so my first reaction was a bit like, oh, judgment. But now I've had a chance to digest it and think about it and do the survey and everything. I think it really closely links to guilt. I think judgment of self, judgment of others. A lot of the work that I do with mums, and actually now specifically, I'm writing a book about maternal guilt. So a lot of what I talk about in that area is the way that we judge ourselves. So the way that we make ourselves feel guilty, which I think does equate to judging ourselves.
Mhm.
I encourage mums to challenge where those thoughts and feelings are coming from. So do they come from outside societal messaging that we grow up with and that we absorb without even realizing it? Are we judging ourselves because we're judging ourselves against a set of standards or norms of society, or are we judging ourselves because we genuinely feel that something is off in terms of not being aligned with our values? And if it's that, This is what I say to mums, like if you're feeling guilty because, and this is a big one for me, right? If you're feeling guilty because your kids are on the screen too much, or actually worse, if you're feeling guilty because you're looking at your phone too much, that's a big one for me.
Mm,
That's normally telling me to put my phone down and be more present with my kids. So for me, that's like a more of a values driven kind of guilt or judgment. But there are so many different types of judgment, and I think first and foremost, not just for mums, for everyone, I would really encourage people, when they feel that judgment of themselves or of other people, to question, interrogate those feelings a little bit and sort of
mm,
wonder. And maybe actually with judgments of others, there's a whole nother piece, isn't there, which maybe we can go into, which is like, I don't know, why are we judging that other person? What is that triggering in us that's making us judge that other person in that way? Because we all make judgments of people, but is it a fair judgment? Is it an unfair judgment? Where's it coming from? And is it telling me something about myself?
mm.
So yeah, those are my initial reflections.
So I literally just started the intro about saying about how typically it carries this really big negative connotation, judgment, and that's why I was curious to see what the website says about what judgment actually is. And in essence, I suppose firstly, that's why I found it so hard to think about, right, who's going to be able to talk about judgment other than me on my own podcast, obviously, because and it just didn't feel like many people were forthcoming about it either. And then Marguerite, who you also know from the Reading Club, she said, well, maybe reframe it and advertise it as who's going to come and talk about critical thinking. Thought,
Mm,
okay, that's a fair shout. Let's try it that way. Didn't need to by then because obviously I thought of yourself as well. Um, and I feel like when we hear the word judgment, I was just saying in the intro that we often use it as a weapon, whether it's against ourselves or whether it's against other people. And
mm,
everything that you just said there is about guilt, shame, feeling bad. Essentially, these are all really, really negative connotations. And
mm,
it's perhaps time to flip it on its head and use it less as a weapon and more as a tool. Because I'm looking
mm,
at the website now and it's saying it's a very thinking oriented strength and it's a corrective strength that counteracts faulty thinking. But all the examples you gave there about mum guilt and screen time, etc., all of that is judgment in a negative way. And it just tells us that we're probably using our strengths in a not so healthy way. And maybe we
mm,
need to harness some of that, taking up from 17, or for me, it's 10, taking it up and using it in a healthier way, or maybe taking
mm.
it lower. I don't know. Where's the best place for it to be, actually? Is it in the middle of the
Yeah,
scales?
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I think this, when I talk with, in the motherhood space about guilt, I definitely frame it as like there's two different tracks. There's helpful and guilt and there's unhelpful guilt. And I think it's the
Mm,
same with judgment. And I don't know that the unhelpful guilt is necessarily negative. Like I think even the unhelpful guilt can serve its purpose. But for the big thing for me is like is having awareness of where the thoughts and feelings are coming from. And I think it doesn't actually really matter if, well, to me it doesn't, if it's a thought or feeling that has a sort of negative stem, or like, I don't know, you could say it's more negative than positive, I don't know, but for me it's that the important thing is to interrogate where it comes from and why it's come up, and like you said,
mm.
just then reframe. You could always try and reframe it in a more positive way, but um I'm quite comfortable with the negative emotions coming up, like I'm just curious about what they're telling me.
What's an example of an unhelpful guilt then?
So I think when we compare ourselves to other people
Okay.
and feel like we're lacking, particularly when I talk about that in the motherhood space, I think, it's so easy to think, oh God, that mum is pureeing all of her baby food from scratch and I'm buying mine in a jar. That kind of guilt that comes from um, seeing other people and judging that they are doing better than you are at preparing food for your baby, or whatever it might be. There's a lot of that in motherhood, a lot of that. And I think, and that's something that I've had to navigate at all the different stages. And again, I think that comes down to kind of asking yourself, again with motherhood, but like what is good enough, because okay, I'm yes, in a perfect world I would buy everything organic, I would puree everything from scratch, I would, my children would be, you know they wouldn't have a single terrible chemical exposed to their skin, they would, everything would be utopia, right? But that's not reality. So it's about, where is the bar for good enough? And actually that
Mm,
applies, I think, to everyone. It's not like, you know we can't be perfect. None of us are perfect, you know. So, and especially when it comes to judgment, yeah, okay. I look at that mum and I think I really do wish that I had had the time to puree that baby food, you know, from scratch. I do, because I would feel like I was a better mum, and that I was, you know, my baby was healthier. But the reality is, I've been really busy. I haven't got, you know, the time. And the reality is, I am a good mum. I love my baby. 3 days out of 5, I do puree the food. 2 days out of 5, I buy the food from the supermarket. And you know what? I think that's okay. You know, so it's kind of like judging ourselves, but then actually kind of finding some kind of peace around what is good enough, because none of us
Mm.
are perfect. And I think a lot of us struggle with that, you know, that striving to be perfect. And I think too many people don't think about what good enough looks like.
I think that resonates quite a lot because what you're saying at the end, especially there, is one of the values of this channel, or most of what I do, to be fair. And I have to check myself sometimes in that, have I strived enough? One of my core values is do the best that you can with the resources that you have. There's no point like awaiting or chasing perfection. For example, this podcast itself, it's so messy, inorganic. I don't script. I kind of go with the flow. In fact, I quoted you on my very first episode where I said, if it don't flow, let it
It's
go, or
no,
it's a no. Yeah, that
I
exactly.
know.
I
I
quoted that
swear
on my
that is the
very
best phrase in the world. Oh,
for real.
everyone should live by this. This has changed my life this year.
100%. And do you know what? It helps me realize, especially the kind of journey that I'm on with, personal healing and so on as well. Your intuition gets a little bit more fine-tuned and probably more accurate and better because you sit with your discomfort. You recognize where it is in your body. You recognize what the signals that your bodies are telling you. Is it guilt? Is it shame? Is my judgment for this person actually a flag for something else that I'm experiencing, and so on? And all of those things help to, I suppose, kind of compartmentalize where those feelings are coming from. And you
Mm,
recognize, well, it is what it is. It's either flowing or it's not. Do I keep on with it?
mm,
Do I not? And what resources do I have to help me keep going with this? So yeah,
mm,
it definitely resonates in that perhaps there's an element of managing expectations of perfection when it
mm.
comes to judging
Yeah,
ourselves.
that's really closely linked to judgment. And the other thing that just popped into my head was, you know, to think about how judgment is holding us back. Like, I think you said that you liked the post that I did the other day about, um, when I went camping with my family last weekend, and I went down to the river, and like the kids had been a bit, we had a bit of a exhausting kind of night and morning, and I just thought, I'm just going to take my coffee and I'm going to go down to the river by myself, because it's just, I never do that, you know. So I just said, I'm going, I'll see you later, I'll be back. And I went down to the river, um, and I just had this kind of really like big realization that about the ways in which I've labeled myself, the way, and actually how kind of, I don't know if harmful is the right word, but like how much the judgments that you make of yourself as you go through life affect every single part of your life, you know, like everything that you think you're capable of. Every time you judge yourself to be not capable of something, you're closing a door, you know, to something else in your life. And I was just drinking my coffee and I just looked at the river and I thought, I mean, it's like a stream, so don't, you know, get the wrong idea. It wasn't like I couldn't jump in and like
Yeah,
submerge
yeah,
myself completely, um but I just thought, God, you know, it's a really nice morning, and it's that water looks really nice, and I know it will be cold, but I feel I really fancy just like just, you know, having a splash around. And and then there was this voice in my head that was just like, you're not the kind of person that does, you know, just like freely just strips off and jumps in the river. It just was
mm,
a kind of like that voice. I just thought, where is that voice coming from that tells me that I'm not? But it's true, you know, I kind of look back at all the times. You know, in some ways, I like to think I've had this adventurous life, and I've done lots of traveling, and um, you know, a lot of it on my own. You know, and you could say that, yeah, some of that, I guess, it is quite adventurous for a 20, whatever I was at the time, 27-year-old to travel across India by herself for 3 months, or you know, um, I've done some things that have felt adventurous, but in other areas, like things like that, like spontaneous moments of, I want to do that, or I'm just gonna jump in, or did it. I'm always the person, or I have always been, often been the person that is on the sidelines watching the people that are spontaneous, or you know. So anyway, long story short, I did jump in, and it wasn't very deep, and it probably wasn't as dramatic as it sounds, but like for me, it was quite dramatic, because it was really overcoming that judgment of myself. I thought I'm gonna be 43 this year. I'm not a child, but nor am I ancient. um do I want to spend the rest of my life telling myself that I'm not the sort of person that XYZ? you know Not really. I'd rather be the sort of person that tries stuff still, and changes the script. Why not? We write our own narrative as we go, right? There's no reason why we can't change it.
That was a narrative that really resonated with me. So when I saw that LinkedIn post, I thought, yes, I knew I made the right decision by having you on the podcast. I was looking forward to going into that particular scenario that you just shared, mainly because it resonates so much. I don't know whether it resonates so much with me at this stage of my life, but certainly if I was to look at when I was 21 versus 26, when I was in my mid to late 20s, I was very much mentally probably 40, 50 years old, and everything had to be really, really serious. Life had to be serious. Everything was about work, save money for your house, and get married, have kids, focus on all the routine things that society tells you that you have to get on with, right? Um, and I think somewhere deep down in like I stopped reading, I stopped dancing, I stopped swimming, I stopped doing all the things that I loved because everything was so work focused. And I guess my question is, what essentially do you think happens between us and our go-getter, daring selves that travels through India? I mean, I've done some like, what's it called? Co-steering, like type outdoorsy activities, jumping off cliffs into the water. Now I would think 100 times before, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to die if I jump this cliff, for example. It's really dramatic and it's quite, but I can feel it in my body, that fear. I never so much had that when I was much younger and with the old judgment, if you like. What do you think has happened between then and now that has crept in that stops us from doing those things?
I think the two things that popped into my head, like you said, just say what pops into your head. So here we go. Conformity is the first one. Like, the societal messaging, all of that. I think life does get more serious, and we do get all these messages about where we should be at different ages. And I think the beauty of being in your 20s, particularly, I mean, that was a great sort of stage of my life, for many reasons, but also terrible for many reasons. Like the the emotional like heartbreak and wrangling and all that stuff. I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't go back there for a million pounds. I really wouldn't.
Mm,
um but there was a freedom in my 20s which I don't feel now. And I think a bit, for me, like now having two children, that definitely puts a different spin on things that to me feel unsafe. That is a big one for me. But I think I think a lot of that is the social conditioning and the conformity, and you are this age now, and this is how people at this age behave. And then that leads into my second point, which is the increasing kind of awareness we have of our own mortality. So,
mm,
I'm 43 this year, like I said, and God, I go from like one end of the spectrum to the other, from like deep gratitude to still be here when, I know a lot of people who aren't, even at this age, which is tragic. And just wanting to fill my life with as much as I possibly can. And then this creeping horrible terror of like, oh my God, am I more than halfway through? Like much more than halfway through? Like, oh my God. Um, and so I think it's like a mixture of that. It's like the social conditioning and the feeling that you have to conform, and the feeling of kind of, I guess, increased fragility, and getting the aging and all that. But all of that is crap, I think, as well, because the people I know, like I know like a lot of older people who are just aging so beautifully because they just don't care.
mm,
They don't, I think, actually, those people that I'm thinking of don't have quite such strict judgments of themselves. They I spoke to a lady the other day. She's 69 and we do boxing together. And when she told me that she was 69, I nearly fell over. I was like, oh my
wow.
God. And she is as strong as me, like as good, if not better than me at boxing. And I was like, what is your secret? And she's like, I acknowledge that that I will have physical, or I do have physical, more physical challenges, but like I'm just not prepared to kind of conform to the stereotype of the
Mm,
69-year-old woman. And I think that's it. I think that's like the key to life. And maybe that feeds very much into judgment of what we can achieve, what we're capable of. I don't feel, God, I cannot believe I'm 43. This is not how I thought 43 would feel. I still feel like I'm 20, 25. So
I love that.
I just don't want to behave like I'm getting older. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the key to life. I don't know.
There is such a stigma about aging, isn't there, in our society? You're right. It's social conditioning is so ingrained in it. Our these corporations and capitalist crap that we live in, for want of a better
Yeah,
word, they will sell you all these anti-aging creams and anything to reverse aging,
I
color your
know.
hair when it's anything just to avoid it. And it's like, but isn't that a fact of life? And what does that
I
say for the
know.
way that we treat older people in our society? I think it's really damaging.
It's true
And
though, isn't it?
mm,
Yeah, the
when you said
judgment of
about
older
sorry, when you said about social conditioning, that really resonated actually because I thought that is the thing. That's the thing that created the business muted healing because it's about muting that social conditioning and hearing what really matters most to you. Hence the
people.
name healing once you've been able to mute all of those noises that take you away from yourself. And I'm
Mm,
curious about there was a part that you mentioned. Uh it was, yes, about the lady who boxes at 69. It reminded me of one of my first clients when I first started coaching. So very kind of a novice, if you like, or in training, you could say, because I was quite intimidated by the 70-year-old woman who had come back to coaching in order to try and like make a change in her life, do something with the unhappy marriage that she was in and move out of that and so on. And I remember feeling a real sense of awe and inspiration because I thought to myself, wow, look at the age that you're at and you are still determined to rewrite the narrative. And I love that for you. And I remember feeling so intimidated that after a few sessions, I was like, I don't think I can help you. I think you might need someone with more experience. And I passed her on. But little did I realize that actually I had so much to learn from that experience and continue to be inspired about. Um,
mm,
and it just goes to show, I suppose, it's never too late to pick up that pen and rewrite the narrative.
I think judgment just for, I mean, yeah, it's a big thing. Judgment of aging is a big thing. And I think we don't realize how much it affects all of us. I have this all the time at the moment. I'm at that age where some of my friends are getting Botox, and I have days when I'm like, look in the mirror and I think, oh God, I look awful. Maybe I should do that. And then I'm like, no, God, no, just be grateful to be here, bring in all the positive psychology, rationale, and like just have gratitude for everything that you have. And but it's so ingrained in us, just like the guilt is so ingrained in motherhood, and the judgment is so ingrained. There's this whole, again, another whole societal narrative about women hit 50 and then they're suddenly invisible. Well, I just don't. I think I'm not buying into that anymore. I think everyone's different, and we should not judge people for getting older. We should just kind of realize that it's a natural, we're all
Mm.
getting older. It doesn't matter where we are on the cycle. um I think that's an area of judgment that makes me quite sad, because there are so many people over the age of 50. Like, well, why are we judging everyone for their age? With age comes wisdom, right?
Sad, and also I'm feeling a little bit angry now as well because I'm starting to think about like the creative industry in the world of performing arts, acting, drama, whether it's screen or on theatre. I literally heard it last week, where a person in a show that I'm potentially working with is talking um about a certain body type or a look, and the justification was, yeah, but that's just the way that the industry is. And I'm fed up of hearing that. I get
Mhm.
so angry when I hear that, and I just think you lot are so fickle that you think that you don't have the power to make that change, or you've just
Yeah.
accepted status quo. Meh, I'll deal with it. And you can accept that status quo because that status quo benefits you. No, so you don't need to take two guesses to guess what gender that person was, or even perhaps what background they come from in ethnicity wise. And it's like, why would you want to change it if you're the one
Mhm.
that's experiencing that privilege all the time? And I get really angry about even myself when I look back at the judgments I had when we were younger. You'd make jokes about people growing older. Gosh, getting into your 30s, especially in a South Asian culture, getting into your 30s and being unmarried is abhorrent. Or there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with somebody else. How dare you do that? Times are changing now a little bit, but there's still like I feel like I'm at this transition stage in my early 30s where you've got friends who are still young and graduating and finding out their careers, finishing off their grad schemes and so on. And then you've got friends who are your age or a bit older, settled with kids. But listen to the language even I'm using. What does settled mean? Why does settled
I'm not that
mean?
settled.
Do you know what I mean? Most of my friends like who are parents are struggling every day, like good
Yeah,
struggles and struggles that they've chosen, struggles of parenthood and so on. But they're still
yeah,
loving life. But it's like, what does that mean if you're settled? You're still stressed about paying the mortgage every month.
yeah. But that's interesting in itself in terms of judgment, isn't it? Because it's like even making favorable judgments about people being settled with kids, or like it just shows that are we think we know things about other people that we don't, you know. And I guess that is a key part of judgment. It's like, and that's why I always come back to interrogating when it's judgment, when you're judging your own feelings about yourself, the importance of judging where they're coming from. And when you're judging your feelings about other people, you know, again, just like interrogating those feelings, because you might feel that you know someone or why they act a certain way or what their life is like, but it's often not the case. You know, it's like, so I think maybe the counterbalance of judgment is, you know, the curiosity and the compassion, and yeah, kind of like being willing to put yourself in someone else's position, um a bit of patience, even maybe, just to sort of, before you jump to judgments, because you know I say all this as if I'm like the most, you know, the least judgmental person in the world, but you know I'm quick to judge sometimes, and I'm trying to be less so. um there are some red there are, you know, with everything that's been going on in the world recently, there's been some red lines for me, and I've been really quite firm with some people
Mm,
about what I will and what I won't tolerate. um but I'm trying to not be judgmental as much as I can, you know.
mm.
I actually think that with everything that's happening in the world, division is like the worst thing that we could do. And I think judgment can be, it can be helpful. It can help us to interrogate our emotions or our feelings about things, but it can also be quite divisive. And I think we need to be careful about that.
See, that's a really interesting one, and we'll call it for what it is because I somehow find a way to always bring it back to Gaza in every episode in some way or another.
I
And I
didn't say
think,
it explicitly.
yeah, no, I mean, do you know what? In the beginning, I used to make a judgment to not say explicitly because I I don't actually know. I've never questioned myself on it. I think it was probably a fear of upsetting someone, a fear of getting it wrong, a fear of um to be brutally honest, I think it's a fear of people are going to hear that word and then switch off because that's
Yeah.
the world that I live in that I know that there are some people who are so happy with their privilege that they won't care and want to do anything about it. And
Mm,
I think as sadly the months have gone on, I wish it hadn't gone on, but the months that have gone on and the genocide is ongoing, I've become a little bit more cutthroat with my judgment in that, you know what, screw it, I will say the words because someone's got to put them on the map. And I'm
mm,
not saying that I am that person on the soapbox that has to do it, but people, we do have to do it. We have a collective responsibility to keep saying names, saying, you know, individual names, country names, because they all matter. And we're
mm,
up against a system that doesn't
mm,
want them to matter. Like when we go
mm,
back to the aging thing, it's systemic, and this is what really gets me that we're trying to deal with these character strengths. I suppose maybe this is where I'm. Thank you for listening to my ramblings because I'm trying to organize it all. Over the last few episodes, particularly, I felt this frustration with why those character strengths I'm finding a little bit difficult, and I think it's that I'm finding them stand against systems a lot, and that
mm.
it infuriates me because I feel like I don't have much control, although I do know I do.
Yeah, God, that's really an interesting one. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to have these conversations. I don't feel I've been doing enough, but I have been challenged, but many times, on whether it's appropriate for me to be using my motherhood platform, you know, to talk about Gaza. And that was a funny one because it kind of it infuriated me. And then I think for a while, I've actually, just to be honest, my position on that is I've been very, very, very careful to not share anything traumatizing, because I have a following of mothers. I do not want someone who's following me to go onto my page and see a really distressing video, or you know, that is a hard line for me. And but that does not mean that I can't use my platform to talk about the fact that what's happening is not okay. And I have struggled with that, in truth. And people have said to me, maybe it's best if you talk about that somewhere else, or maybe it's best if you don't use your professional page. But those kind of judgments are like water off my back. I literally could not care less. Like, you whatever. And if I lose followers because of it, whatever. I actually think that's the beauty of getting older. I care far less what people think of me now. Far less. Isn't that
Honestly,
interesting?
sometimes I think, if I had the attitude that I have now about people's thoughts, if I had that attitude when I was in my 20s, I would have had a lot happier time in my 20s.
Exactly. I'm sorry, there's some drilling right underneath me.
That's
That's
all right.
really helpful for your recording.
No, no, it's
Um,
fine.
yeah, I think the judgment, when you get older, you start to call out the BS. When people come at you, and you just think, you know what, whatever this is that you're coming at me with, I'm not here for it. In my 20s, I would have been racked with worry about, why does that person think that about me? And now I just think it's just, maybe we're just not meant to, cross paths. Or I just feel more secure in myself. And I think that is a beautiful thing about aging. Actually, I think you do judge yourself less, and
there's
probably
some
judge others less.
there's something that's quite telling there that I'm noticing because again, with my work in schools and young people, I see this change, and I see it in myself and my own family and friends who are in their 20s versus their 30s as well. When you're in your 20s, there is this kind of ideology that being judgmental is bad and you shouldn't be judgmental, keep an open mind to everyone. And yet, in doing so, you are very, very judgy when you're younger because and you don't I don't think you recognize that you have it in you because you judge other people for not having a life that is, either you think you're amazing and that other people should be doing and thinking things the way that you are, or vice versa, you think you're absolutely rubbish and why aren't you where somebody else is. Fast forward that into your 30s, I feel like judgment is actually a lot better practiced. Although theoretically you might be quite strong on, no, actually, I don't agree with that, and I'm unapologetically not going to agree with that. For example, let's use Gaza and Israel. I think in my 20s, I probably would have been a guy who was at both sides and tried to equate it as if the air quotes war or the conflict is equal and that all lives matter, etc. So I would have been an all lives matter guy probably in my 20s, not realizing that that's actually quite harmful and detrimental because all lives do not have the same equitable status on this planet. And that's not an emotional judgment, that's just a matter of fact. It's an objective fact that we live in. And now in my 30s, I would categorically say it's Black lives that matter, it's Palestinian lives that matter, it's trans, it's women, it's because all lives are not the same for me to make that statement. I cannot sit here and tell you that there is one size fits all because it doesn't.
Mm,
So that element of
mm,
judgment is really weird that it changes as you grow older, like you said.
mm. And I think, being another decade down this journey from you, I guess I also feel that it's really important. I mean, I mentioned division before, but I think, and maybe it's because of the world events, particularly, that I'm preoccupied with this, but I am more careful. You know, I mean, the example I gave just then kind of like maybe was a bit flippant. If someone, I don't care what you think of me. Well, that may be so, but I may not care what people think of me, but I I don't want to judge people without being fair.
Mm,
Like, I think that's something that has come with getting older, is like, I have a better appreciation of why people behave the way they behave. I mean, I've got 2 psychology degrees under my belt, so you'd hope I
mm,
hope I would have some understanding of that. Um, but yeah, I think I am trying, as I get older, to be more understanding of people who don't have the same view as me.
yeah.
And that's different from not caring what people think. Like, if someone makes a flippant judgment of me, then I can live with that, is what I'm saying. But I in return, I try to think, okay, where is this judgment coming from of another person, or why is this person judging me? Try and find that reason for that division, and see if there's a way of, bridging it. I guess that comes with aging, and also, yeah, an awareness of the world events, which is more acute than it has
Mm,
been for me in the past. That we need to overcome, the sounds like a really grand sweeping statement, but like, the only way we can heal the world and humanity is through overcoming division, and that means overcoming judgment.
Yeah,
Right.
spot on. Connecting. And anyone who's worried about growing older, then you've heard it here yourself. You judge yourself less and you understand other people better. So, there's
Exactly.
everything to look forward to on the other side of growing
Exactly.
older.
And you don't actually have to like subscribe age, it's like if you tell yourself that you're 70 and you need to behave like a 70-year-old, then you will.
Yeah,
But if you tell yourself that, I mean, I'm just like, it's ridiculous that I'm 43, just let's just roll with it, whatever. If this is what 43 feels like, I don't know why I was so scared about it. Do you know what I mean?
spot absolutely. And it's like, you know what, again, I want to go back to that thing about language, and perhaps the listeners can take away something there as well about language and how we use it, about growing older and so on. Growing older doesn't have to be a negative connotation. If that's an objective statement, I am growing older than I was yesterday, for example.
Mm.
When there's a birthday coming up, I know that there's like friends who will jokingly say, I'm 30 going on 18. Or, especially again in the South Asian community, if you're in your mid-20s, you know that the aunties and uncles are going to be pressuring you for marriage. So you start pulling
Mm.
jokes of, no, no, I'm still 16 and so own your
Mm.
age, say exactly what it is that you are,
Yeah.
and just have it as a matter of fact statement and let other
Yeah.
people buy into that as well.
I wish I could remember. I saw a beautiful post yesterday. I mostly hate all these pithy, rubbishy gifs that you see, and stuff you see on Instagram that make you feel guilty about stuff. But there was quite a beautiful one yesterday, which was about turning a year older. I wish I could remember who it was. Um, it was basically just saying, on this lady's birthday every year, she just thinks to herself, I will never be this age again.
Wow.
So why not enjoy the next year for what it is? Because this will never come again. And it is what it is. There's no point going into each year thinking, oh my god, I'm going to be a year older. It's like, I saw another one yesterday about just like a little visual of dividing your life, potentially however many years you have in your life. This was an example of if you live to 90 squares, um, representing every year of your life, if you make it to 90. And it was kind of just saying, how do you want to fill each of these squares? Like there's only 90 of them. If
Mm,
that's it, that's your life. It's in the blink of an eye. And I think actually that's another thing. When I was younger, that used to terrify me, and I thought the older I got, the more I would be terrified about, dying. And I mean, yes, it is kind of something that I worry about, um I have that more of that appreciation of like really filling the years, and maybe that comes back to I don't know where that mantra for the beginning of the year came from. I really don't know, but it has literally guided my entire year. If it doesn't flow, it's a no. I just it just is something that I've really incorporated into my life. And I think, and it feeds into all the things we've talked about, just let go of the small stuff, make decisions led by your gut and your heart. And, you know, don't be afraid to just say no to things that aren't right for you, and I think all of that comes with age as well. It's like I've made some big decisions this year that have been quite brave and quite scary, but they've all been really congruent with my values, um and they've been good judgments, if you
mm.
will. um and I think that does also come with that wisdom of getting older, and kind of like, I know I've got less time on this planet than I did 10 years ago, so why not just make the most of it, and cut out the stuff that's not so good and bring
Mm.
in more of the stuff that is good.
There's two things there that you inspire me, and we'll take it towards the wrap up of this conversation. So, firstly, what I'm hearing is that judgment is a responsibility that we have towards other people, towards humanity, but also to ourselves. And I think it's high time that we started to recognize judgment as a tool of responsibility that we're in control of and we can use to our benefit or to our detriment. Is it
Mm,
unhelpful guilt or helpful guilt? And so, recognizing where it's coming from. You mentioned that you've used some great judgments, you made some great decisions this year. I want to start off on a more generic question, and then I want to know about your judgment to write a book. So before we
mhm,
get to that, let's talk about a question I've had in mind. I do a lot of work with trauma and people who have had traumatic childhoods, for example, and I always want to know about parents and the decisions they make or the rationales they make when they are making a decision. So, for
mm,
full context, I'm a big believer that parenting is probably the hardest job in the world, if not the
mhm,
hardest job in the world, because you're in charge of many humans. There's a big responsibility you brought into the world, and you don't know which of your decisions today are going to have a lasting impact in 10 years' time, for example, or something that that child will happen to remember and hold on to in their context.
Mm.
And I think as we're becoming a more trauma-aware world and trauma-informed world, I think, anyways, correct me if I'm wrong, parents are more conscious about doing the wrong thing.
Mm.
How do you make those decisions, those
Mm.
judgments?
I think that you make very good points, and I think it probably comes down to, so something I live, my mantra of parenting, if you will, is rupture and repair. So I had a bit of a moment like about a year ago when I was going through a real phase of not good enough in my parenting, and I was reading all the books and, like, the articles and all of this stuff. And I remember being, you have these moments in life, don't you, when you're like, and I remember there was one moment when I was sitting in bed next to my husband and we were reading, and I was reading this self-help book about parenting, and I just turned to him and said, oh my god, we're doing everything wrong. Like, we're completely screwing up our children. Like, this is terrible. And he just looked at me and said, you have got to stop reading these books. Like, you're so, I was so anxious and I was so worried about getting everything wrong. And I actually I was finding it really hard to assimilate all of the advice and stuff, so in the
Mm,
day to day, I would kind of freeze, like, in moments like, what am I supposed to do? And my kids are fiery, feisty, kids, and they're not always that easy to kind of get a handle on. So I just had this huge guilt, like, oh my god, I'm not patient enough. I'm snapping at them too much. Blah blah blah. Anyway, long story short, um, the one piece of parenting advice which I have seen over and over again, and which I have really taken on board, and I believe is a key thing, is when you have these ruptures will happen all the time, right? There is no way, I don't believe there's a single parent on this planet who has a perfect calm home life with absolutely no, chance that their children are going to get screwed up by, being screwed up, being, shouted at all the time, or um we all lose our cool. We're human, and we have to have self-compassion, firstly, for ourselves. And when we lose our cool, it's just important to make sure that we repair that with the kids, not like the next day. It's same as going to bed on an argument, with a family member or a partner or whatever. Just own it, that you lost your cool. Explain that you lost your cool. Kids are pretty smart, that even from a young age they understand the concept that mummy's just lost it. Mummy felt angry. Mummy was frustrated because you wouldn't put your legs in the pajamas. Um, Mummy's sorry. Mummy loves you. That is the core of my parenting approach. And you
mm,
know what? Since I've adopted that, I have felt a lot less guilty, because
okay.
I know that I always repair things with my kids immediately. And I also know that I have enough self-compassion to understand that it's human to lose our rag sometimes.
Mm.
They test us for a reason, and they test us well to the edge of our sanity. But the repair thing for me, does that answer your question?
It does, and there's something there about I wonder if you're also setting a model for the teacher students, what the hell? You're also setting a model for your children in that you're able to exercise self-compassion and forgiveness for yourself. They will also exercise self-compassion and forgiveness, not just for themselves, but also for you, in that when they recognize that, you know what, mummy went through life gently rather than being so harsh on everything and so uptight and so strict. That's the
Mm,
kind of values you'd want to have in your children.
mm.
So, yeah, it does answer my question, actually. I think it's just one of those things that experientially, until I have probably one of my own children, I'm never going to fully understand it. And that's why I say parenting is, if not the hardest job in the world, one of the very hardest jobs in the world, because you never know what day is going to go how, and it's non-stop.
Oh
So,
God. Do you know what? My husband's linked up my smartphone to my phone, and I don't know how to stop it, but it keeps my watch keeps ringing, and I don't know how to stop it. It's driving me mad. So
um,
sorry.
that's all right. No worries. We're going to be wrapping up soon, anyways. But before we
Yeah.
do that, I do want to know a little bit about the decision, the judgment that you made to write a book this year. Did it come spontaneously? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been a lifelong enjoyer of writing, I would say. And I've done it sort of, through my 20s. I used to write kind of first drafts of novels and then put them in a drawer. And I have also always had this interest in psychology. And then when I did my degree and became a mother at, around the same time, and had this kind of big realization that actually coaching was what I wanted to do and how I could apply my psychology, and that the guilt that I felt with being a mother was something that I wanted to work with for other mothers. So that was a kind of beautiful, natural thing, the way that that evolved. Like I did the course, I became a mother. I realized that I wanted to help other mothers to navigate this tricky, experience of life and motherhood. But yeah, the book. So I've just always kind of jokingly said that I had a book in me, and that it was on my bucket list. And actually, this feeds back into everything we talked about. I'm a firm believer in not having regrets in life, and I I know that if I didn't write this book, I would be on my deathbed in however many years, hopefully a very long time away, um, with that regret that I didn't do it. Because it's so easy to let imposter syndrome and believe you're not good enough and all of those things. But the fact is, I have a fairly robust, you know, amount of research and evidence and tools that can be helpful for people that are evidence based. I have a lot of interviews with mothers, and now also quite a lot of interviews with experts in the field of motherhood and motherhood studies. And I just want to share it. It's such a rich kind of wealth of people's experience, and it's just going to, hopefully it's going to come together in a book which is not just practical in the sense that it's going to give mums some helpful tools that they can use to support their own well-being, and overcome their own feelings of guilt. But it's also going to help them realize that they're not alone, and that there's a lot of other mothers that are feeling exactly the same way. So yeah, I'm in chapter 3, and just have the most insane amount of incredible quotes and all this kind of stuff. So I'm at that stage of trying to work out how I get it all in this tiny little book. But yeah, hopefully it will be good. It's a
It,
passion project.
it will be good. A, because it's got passion in there, like you just said, and also B, there's such a demand for it. Like when you just said there about, to hopefully the intention is to help mothers remember that they're not alone. That's the part that most of my mum clients who come to me with their feelings of I don't know who I am anymore, that's the part where they usually break down, where you just
Mm,
offer them that little bit of compassion, and you remind them that they're not alone, or they remind themselves through the coaching questions that you have if you've taken a non-directive approach. And that's usually the
mm,
part where they kind of just break down because they have been feeling so alone for so long. So it would be
yeah.
nice to have this book as a little companion for them, just to kind of pick them up as they need to. So all the best with it. Now, if any of the
Thank you.
listeners want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
So I'm on Instagram at Flourishing Mother. I'm also on Facebook. I think I'm on Facebook as Belinda Jane Batt, but I have a free Facebook community, which is the Flourishing Mother community. So you can search for that and join for free. And yeah, there'll be some resources and some nice support on there as well. So those are probably the best ways. Or you can go on my website, which is www.theflourishingmother.com.
Amazing. All of those things will be in the description box as well, whether you're listening to this on Spotify or YouTube. They'll be there. So click away and give Belinda a like. Keep an eye out for the book as well. And just want to say thank you on behalf of all the listeners and myself, Belinda. It's been a really inspiring conversation, actually. A good way to start a Thursday morning because I feel a
The
little less,
best way. The
yeah,
best
definitely.
way.
Feel a little
Thank you.
less procrastinating.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Afsa. I really appreciate it.
Oops.
Okay, so my takeaway from that is this judgment thing has really got me in a conundrum because you know what I'm doing lately is I'm always like running around trying to fill up as much of the day as possible and being productive, etc. Which is actually anyone who knows me will know that that's not unlike me. It's very similar to how I've always been, but I suppose the intentionality is different. I think what's different is that I'm better able to judge when I need to stop and breathe. And you can usually tell that from when you feel short of breath. So you can tell I'm in a different garb because I was shooting something else. It's the next day from the judgment video that I shot, which I actually shot, as you could tell from the beginning of the video. I tried to do the introduction 5 minutes before I interviewed Belinda. I then interviewed Belinda, and then I went straight into work for the day because I had a meeting straight after that. and I haven't had the time to kind of wrap that up. So now I have to wrap up that judgment episode on a different day, which is fine. But what I'm doing there essentially is splitting my brain into lots of different psychological spaces and then having to jump between each one. And that's sometimes okay, and sometimes it's not the most productive. I think it's doing okay for now, but my body is feeling it because I haven't had the time to go to the gym this week. I haven't had the time to stop and move my body or sit in my body. And I can usually notice that when my words start slurring or stammering, or I just feel short of breath. And all of the above is happening. So I guess this is an excellent time for me to exercise judgment. Judgment stresses me out because I find that we use that word to talk about judging other people a lot and not enough about judgment for ourselves. So moving forward, I want to ensure that my target, my thing to think about as I go through life the next few weeks, where it comes to other people, consider curiosity rather than judgment. And where it comes to me, exercise judgment where it might be beneficial to me and exercise curiosity where it might be beneficial to me. So technically, my character strengths was judgment first and then curiosity. As you know from the last episode, the episodes were kind of uploaded in the opposite order. I'm going to try and flip them. I know it's only one space. I know it's only number 9 and 10, so literally one space different, but I'm going to try and flip them and exercise more curiosity rather than judgment. Curiosity for when I am feeling a certain way. Why are you feeling that way? Why are you feeling triggered by somebody else? If you're judging them, what is it about that situation that's making you feel a certain way? And I think that will help me be a lot more compassionate about certain things. Don't get me wrong, there's certain things that actually require, they're quite blanket approaches. For example, with certain political ideologies nowadays, I can appreciate and understand and accept that people have different political ideologies, but I also cannot allow that energy to infiltrate my energy. And I know that it kind of feels a bit like I'm creating an echo chamber. So I suppose I'll have to exercise judgment there. Where somebody might be challenging my views and this is helpful for my growth, wonderful. Accept it, deal with it with curiosity, Afsar, and accept it into your life. Where somebody is perhaps challenging your echo chamber, but you know that that is completely morally wrong, as there is a lot of that discussion happening these days. Sorry, if it doesn't flow, it's a no, as Belinda said, and I think I should exercise a lot more of that. I think my problem is, and this is where I need to exercise judgment more of. So those of you know, in episode 1, I literally started by quoting Belinda saying, if it don't flow, let it go. If it don't flow, it's a no. And quite frankly, that is serving me really well. But I think I am still spread a bit too thinly in that all of these things are flowing and all of these things are good. They are slow burners that I'm taking on in terms of my work and professional life. But perhaps perhaps they don't all need to flow in tandem. Perhaps I should say no and let it flow another time so that I can make room for more flowing in my personal life. Because at the moment, life is very work professionals. So I guess thank you for listening to my rambles. We're going to round up this episode by saying, if it doesn't flow, it's a no. And for me personally, if it does flow, doesn't always mean that it should be a yes either. If it does flow, maybe it's a later, park it, not now. Yeah. And make room for things that enhance your positive energy and use your judgment to enhance, is this a useful feeling? Is this helpful guilt? Is this helpful shame? Is this helpful fear that I am experiencing? Because there's been a lot of negative feelings that I've been feeling lately. So lean into it with curiosity and question, is it helpful or is it unhelpful? So yeah, curiosity, then judgment. That's my goal. Curiosity and then judgment. Nothing happens coincidentally. Perhaps I was meant to upload it in the other way because that's my way of manifesting that curiosity should come before judgment. So that's my goal, to put curiosity before judgment. Curiosity before judgment. Thank you for listening to all of my ramblings. I was able to take my thoughts from this very big mess to a more tangible statement. Practice curiosity before judgment. I'm going to leave you with that, everyone. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next month for 2 further character strengths social intelligence and teamwork, I believe. See you then.